This is the Amazfit Active Edge, and it's one of Amazfit's newest devices on the market right now. And if the name of this watch sounds familiar, that's because it's the sibling to another watch from Amazfit called the Amazfit Active, which I actually reviewed a couple of weeks ago. Now, in the comments of that review, a lot of people requested this watch because it is very similar to the original Amazfit Active non-Edge, but the Edge does have some features that the Active does not, and vice versa, where the Active has some features that this watch doesn't. It's all very confusing, and in this video today, I hope I can sort of clear that up. As a quick note before we move on, this video is not going to be an overly in-depth review of the Amazfit Active Edge because I've sort of already reviewed this watch in that other Amazfit Active video. If you want to learn all of the menu items and the app experience and all of that stuff, go check out my other video with the Amazfit Active in-depth review. In this video today, we're just going to focus on what's different about the Amazfit Active Edge. We'll talk about some of the pros and cons of this watch, and we'll also look at things like GPS and heart rate accuracy from the sensors built into this watch. If that all sounds good, let's move on to the first topic of this video, and that's pricing and options. The Amazfit Active Edge comes in at $149 here in the USA, and that is the exact same retail price as the Amazfit Active non-Edge. One thing to keep in mind about pricing with these watches is that they're basically always on sale, so if you visit the Amazon link in the description down below, you might find that it's actually discounted. Pricing aside, let's move on to the color options. On the Active Edge, you have 3 different colors available. There's a mint green, which is kind of cool looking. There's a standard black model, and then there's the Midnight Pulse, which is the one I have here, which I think is super cool. The band of this watch is actually transparent gray. You can kind of see through it, and the case of the watch itself is also the same color, and I just think it gives off a really cool aesthetic. It's got a kind of subtle vibe to it, but I really enjoy the look of this watch, and I have no qualms wearing this throughout the day. But of course, that's just my opinion, and you might think this color is ugly. That's up to you. Taking a closer look at the hardware here, let's talk about size and weight. This watch is a little bit bigger than the original Amazfit Active. It comes in at 46 millimeters in diameter, and it's about 12 millimeters thick, and it weighs 34 grams, which is a little bit heavier than the Amazfit Active non-Edge, but still very light. For a quick size comparison, I've got some other watches on the table here. All the way on the left, I've got the Apple Watch Series 7. This is a 45 millimeter form factor. To the right of that, we have the Garmin Instinct 2 Solar. Then we have the Garmin Instinct 2X all the way on the right here, which is a larger 51 millimeter form factor. And then there's the Amazfit Active Edge here. And as you can see, side by side with some of these other rugged Garmin watches, it looks very similar in terms of aesthetic and in size. When it comes to comfort on the Amazfit Active Edge, I can wear this watch all day and sleep with it at night thanks to that super light weight. You kind of forget it's on your wrist. I think the only complaint I have about the Active Edge when it comes to comfort comes down to the included band, because this band does not have a lot of stretch in it. The rubber is very stiff and it is a little bit uncomfortable. So if your wrist does fall between 2 sizes in these notches, it can be a little bit uncomfortable because on one hand, it might be too loose for a good heart rate reading. On the other hand, you might have to crank it down so tight you lose circulation. Let's talk about the design and hardware a little bit. Of course, this is a round design as compared to the original Amazfit Active, which is a square Apple Watch looking design. With this one, with the Active Edge, they were sort of targeting that G-Shock Garmin crowd, and you can tell just by the design aesthetic. Another big departure on this watch compared to the Amazfit Active is that this one actually has 4 buttons. So you've got a up and down button on the left here, you've got a select button on the top right, and a dedicated back button, where on the standard Active model, it has a single button, and you do have to rely on the touchscreen for just about everything on that watch. Now, even though there are 4 buttons on the Amazfit Active Edge, you can get around most of the interface by using these buttons, but in some situations, you do have to touch the screen, so just keep that in mind. If you're someone who runs in the rain a lot, or you're wearing gloves, you may have to touch the screen to interact with it. Speaking of water and durability, that's another area where the Amazfit Active Edge shines. With the Amazfit Active Edge, it has a higher water resistance, it's got shock and dust resistance, and it's a little bit more durable as compared to the standard Active model. This watch has a water resistance rating of 10 atmospheres compared to the 5 atmospheres of the standard Active model. And that kind of boils down to about 100 meters of water resistance on this watch compared to the 50 meters on the standard Active. And And you might be thinking to yourself, well, I don't go scuba diving or anything. That's not really where it matters the most. It really boils down to just how durable this watch is, and it does feel a lot more durable in the hands than the standard Active. And of course, this also leads to this watch having additional activity profiles for things like swimming, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Flipping the watch over, you'll notice a couple of things. First of all, it does have an optical heart rate sensor in the middle here, and this is the exact same sensor that's featured on the Amazfit Active. It also has an SpO2 sensor to pick up your blood oxygen saturation. Other than the optical heart rate sensor, you will notice it has the same charging contacts as the Amazfit Active as well, and it uses the same Amazfit USB charger that comes in the box. This is magnetic, it just pops on the back there and you're charging your watch. Let's jump back to the included band on the Amazfit Active Edge, because like I said, it's not very stretchy, but another thing I don't like about it is that it's not a quick release band. As you can see, there's no quick release pin in the back here, like you'd find on the Amazfit Balance I have here. I can simply push that button and pop these off very easily and swap them out for different materials. Even though this is not a quick release band, it is removable if you want to swap it out. There are little screws here you can remove and you can put a new band in. It is a 22mm band and you can buy replacements on Amazon very cheaply. Now that we've talked about some of the hardware on the Active Edge, let's talk about this display, because as you can see, it's a nice, bright, colorful, saturated display. It's very responsive, it's got a really good refresh rate, but it is not the same display that they used in the Amazfit Active. So on the Amazfit Active non-Edge, that watch featured an AMOLED touch-enabled display, which was very bright and saturated and had a really high pixel density of 341 ppi. This Amazfit Active Edge, on the other hand, uses a standard TFT display, which is sort of like the old watch technology that we used to use for colorful displays. This is not an AMOLED display. This watch also has a lower resolution at 277 pixels per inch, and I'm not sure why they chose to go with this display compared to an AMOLED display, but that's what they did, and this is a budget watch, so I'm not that surprised. With all that being said, this is not a bad display by any stretch of the imagination. The blacks are very black. Like, if you told me this was AMOLED, I'd probably believe you. The only time you run into an issue is when you're outside in direct sunlight, you've got the sun behind you, casting down directly on the screen, and that's where you might need to angle your wrist a little bit to sort of read what's going on. Now let's talk about some of these sensors built into the Amazfit Active Edge, because again, shocker, it's very similar to the Amazfit Active. This watch has the built-in optical heart rate sensor on the back here, it's got GPS built in internally, it's got a gyroscope and a compass on board. However, one thing missing completely on this watch is a temperature sensor, and that is something that was featured on the Amazfit Active. For whatever reason, Amazfit decided to not include the temperature sensor on this watch, and that's something that's kind of a bummer, because that temperature sensor did enable a pretty key feature on the Amazfit Active, and that's the readiness score. If you watched my review of the Amazfit Active non-Edge, you might have noticed a whole section dedicated to that readiness score, and the readiness score basically aggregates a bunch of data from your sleep and your HRV and your skin temperature and your heart rate and your activity level, and tries to give you a number to represent how ready you are to take on more training on a given day. The readiness score feature is really cool, and it's kind of comparable to something like a Whoop or an Oura Ring, for example, or even Garmin's Body Battery and their training readiness feature. But on the Amazfit Active Edge, for whatever reason, this feature does not exist at all, and I think it's mainly because it's lacking that temperature sensor. I could be wrong. Now let's talk about the Amazfit Active Edge's user interface, and again, very similar to the Amazfit Active, but there are some differences. So swiping to the right will bring up your app drawer where you can enter a workout or go through your other metrics, and then swiping left will bring up your phone's notifications, as you can see here. Swiping down from the top brings up your quick menu where you can do various things like turn on the flashlight or check your battery level, and here you can dive into the settings as well and change your brightness. And then swiping up from the bottom here brings up all of your tiles where you can view various things like your weather, recent activities, your coaching feature, your training load, your Pi score, your alarm clock, your sleep metrics, and much more. If I swipe back over into the app tray here, you can see I've got all the standard Amazfit apps that you'd find on the Amazfit Balance or the original Active. We've got workout, workout history, Zep Coach, workout status for your training load, your heart rate metric, blood oxygen, stress tracking, one-tap measurement, Pi score, activity tracking, sleep metrics, weather, the music controls, alarm, calendar, membership, carb, settings, Aura, and more. And under the More section is where you can actually download additional apps from the Zepp store using the Zepp app on your phone. And when it comes to smartwatch features on the Amazfit Active Edge, it's very similar to the other devices from Amazfit as well. It also has this built-in camera remote where you can actually trigger your phone's shutter from a distance using your watch. So if you want to take a group photo, you can set up your camera on a tripod or whatever, and then you can actually take a picture remotely using your watch, which is really cool. But as I scroll through here, you might notice that there is one major feature missing from the Amazfit Active Edge, and that's any form of voice memo or phone calling. So in the original Amazfit Active non-Edge, that watch had a built-in speaker and microphone on board, and what that allowed you to do is to take and make phone calls from your wrist remotely from your phone. So you still need your phone to actually make that cellular connection, but once you have a phone call in progress, you could have your phone in your backpack or your pocket or whatever. You could talk directly into your watch to talk to whoever's on the other end, and it worked really well. And that is a pretty big bummer on the Amazfit Active Edge to be lacking that speaker and microphone feature that's available on the standard Active model, because again, they're basically the same price and that feature is missing. My theory is they left it out because this watch has a much higher durability and water resistance rating, and you see that with the competition as well, because like on the Garmin Epix PRO I have here, this watch is $1,000, and the flagship model from Garmin, it doesn't have a speaker and microphone on board because it's mainly a rugged, outdoorsy style watch, and that's sort of the same here with the Active Edge. Another feature missing from the Amazfit Active Edge is built-in music storage. So if I scroll down to the music widget here, right about there, and dive into this, you can see that I can remotely control the music on my phone from my watch. As you can see, it's got YouTube up with jerry rig everything, and I'm able to pause and play and change the volume of my phone's music from my watch, which is really useful if you've got your watch in a backpack or something and you're listening on earbuds. You can remote control the phone's music. However, unlike the Amazfit Active, the Active Edge does not have internal storage for music. Again, this is kind of a bummer where the Amazfit Active has a feature that this watch does not. This time around though, I don't find this to be a huge deal because on the Amazfit Active, that watch only had 250 megabytes of internal music storage, which is kind of laughable when it comes to storage. That's not going to hold a ton of music, so I never found myself using it anyways. I just use my phone, and this just doesn't have internal music storage. So not a big deal, but something you should know about. I know I've been mainly talking about features that this watch doesn't have in this video, but let's talk about some of the pros of this watch compared to the Amazfit Active. And the first one's going to be activity profiles. So on the standard Amazfit Active, it's got about 127 activity profiles for all the standard stuff. That's like running and biking, indoor running, some sports like soccer and hockey and things like that, but it is missing any sport profiles for swimming or water sports. And that's where the Active Edge shines, because this watch has about 137 activity profiles, and it does include activities for swimming, but more importantly, it has activities for multisport and triathlon mode, which weren't available on the non-Edge Active. But again, there are two major differences that I should mention here. First up is heart rate broadcasting. So on the Amazfit Active non-Edge, you can broadcast the heart rate from the watch to something like a treadmill. So if you're at the gym, you want to see your heart rate on the treadmill instead of just on your watch, you can broadcast that information and the treadmill will pick it up over Bluetooth. This watch, however, does not do that, which is kind of odd. However, the Amazfit Active Edge here does do something majorly different compared to the Amazfit Active, in that it does have external sensor support during activities. So if I dive into the settings here, you'll see an option for workout accessories. And if I dive into that, you'll see that I can add a device. And if I turn on one of my heart rate sensors here, you can see it already popped up under Power Labs, and I can go ahead and I can add that device to use this external sensor for heart rate instead of the optical heart rate sensor built into the watch. Next up, let's talk about battery life, because the Amazfit Active Edge does have a larger battery than its sibling with a 370 milliamp hour battery. However, in practice, even though it does have a bigger battery, that doesn't break down to significantly more battery life in the Active Edge compared to the Active, where this watch will get a little bit more battery life in some situations, but it's largely the same. For example, with typical usage, you can get about 16 days of battery life with default settings out of the Active Edge, where on the standard Active, you'll get about 14 days. On the other hand, when it comes to continuous GPS battery life on the Active Edge, you'll get about 20 hours of use, which is more than the standard Active at about 16 hours of use. So that's a pretty substantial increase there. With battery life out of the way, let's dive into GPS accuracy on the Active Edge because these things all kind of go hand in hand. I'm happy to report that the GPS accuracy of the Amazfit Active Edge has been pretty decent in my testing so far. It's just about as good as what I found with the Amazfit Active. That's to say the GPS accuracy is not amazing or perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it is adequate and pretty much on par with what I'd expect from a $150 watch. When I compared it to something like the Garmin Forerunner 965, which is a multi-band enabled device, at the end of the run, the total distance acquired was pretty similar between the two. With GPS out of the way, let's dive into the heart rate accuracy from the built-in optical heart rate sensor on the back of this watch, and that's where I did run into some issues. In my testing so far, this watch has not performed all that great when it comes to the heart rate sensor on the back of the watch. Compared to an ECG sensor that I wore on my chest, which is typically super accurate, there were some deviations on the Amazfit Active Edge. Overall, I'd say the heart rate accuracy coming out of this watch isn't perfect in my testing so far, and I think my theory on that is because of the band. Like I said earlier, the band is very stiff, it's not super comfortable, and because of that, it doesn't have a lot of stretch, and because of that, I think I have to wear the watch a little bit too loose, and so there's light leak around the edges, and maybe it's moving around a little bit. All I can do here is share my experience. You could have totally different experience. And that all brings us to the final thoughts and conclusions of this video about the Amazfit Active Edge. What do I think about it so far? Should you go out and buy one? Well, I do think the Amazfit Active Edge is a pretty solid smartwatch for under $150 and often on sale closer to $100, which is a crazy value. It's rugged, it's suitable for swimming, it's got triathlon mode and multi-sport mode, it looks great, it's got a decent display, and has a ton of features along with that unique aesthetic and that more rugged look compared to the Amazfit Active. With that said, it does bug me a little bit that its sibling, the Amazfit Active, has some advantages and features that this watch doesn't have, notably the onboard speaker and microphone, which is super handy, and that Readiness score widget, which I wish this watch had. In either case, if you're somebody who's on the market for an outdoorsy watch, you want a watch that has good battery life, you want to go on runs and trail runs and hikes and things like that, it's got basic navigation, music controls, all the smartwatch features you want, sleep tracking and step tracking, calories burned, all that stuff, in a watch that comes in under $150 and looks a lot like a Garmin Instinct 2, then yeah, check out the Amazfit Active Edge. I'd say it's a decent value, it's got decent accuracy in most situations, and even though the heart rate sensor wasn't all that great for me, it does support external sensors, so you can totally bypass that by just wearing a chest strap or an armband or something like that. We have made it! We made it to the end of this video, and if you're still watching, you probably liked this video, and if you did like this video, I would really appreciate it if you went down and gave me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel down below so you don't miss more videos from me in the future. And while you're down there, check out the links in the description where you can buy the Amazfit Active Edge or any other watch that I feature in this video, because those links do help support this channel, but they cost nothing extra to you. And while you're down there checking out the links to these watches, also check out the links to my podcast channel where I talk about this stuff all the time, and of course over to my social media accounts like Strava, Instagram, Threads, all those other things. Follow me over there too. Okay friends, that's all I've got for this one. I hope you liked it, and I will see you next time. Bye!